So hello and welcome to the video. I recently sailed on the MSC Virtuosa from Southampton all the way down to the Canary Islands, and then we cruised all the way back again. It was a 12-night cruise. It's a long way to the Canaries, and we visited 6 ports while also enjoying 6 sea days. In this video I'll review the ports we visited and hopefully give some practical info if you have one of these places coming up in a future itinerary. So if that sounds good, stick around! Hi, I'm Matt and I love cruising. I love the ships, the places you visit, the entertainment, and every now and again I'll also enjoy a drink. So subscribe to see where I go next and perhaps get some inspiration for your next cruise. After a couple of sea days we made it to Lisbon and docked at the old Tobacco Garden dock, which is now the cruise terminal. It's a pretty scenic arrival too, under the 25th of April bridge past the big Christ statue. Considering the size of Lisbon, this is a really excellent location to dock. It's just under a kilometre to the Praça de Comércio, which is probably the most recognisable part of Lisbon. Lisbon is a lovely city to just stroll around. Good shopping, interesting buildings and slightly random wrought iron elevators which are now mostly used by tourists to get panoramic views of the city. The queue for a ticket was a little too long for me on this occasion. I don't generally feature me eating things in my videos following previous feedback from viewers, but I can report that I also enjoyed a delicious pastel de nata. Public transport is good in Lisbon. There's a combined subway and ferry station between the dock and the city. The famous tram network is also close by, although it doesn't seem to run through the very centre of the city, and I actually didn't see a single tram during my visit. They are there though. The ship will offer tours, and you can also arrange tours independently before sailing, but I did notice plenty of tours being offered on the quayside. For a simpler, shorter tour around the city, I am sure you can negotiate some excellent value trips on the day you visit if you don't want to pre-book something. Lisbon has to be one of my favourite cruise ports as it's so accessible, and as it's a larger city there's plenty of things left to do as and when I stop there again, which I actually will in a few weeks' time. Subscribe if you haven't already to see my upcoming coverage of that trip when I am going back on P&O. Next stop was Funchal in Madeira. I'd done another Canary Islands tour a few months earlier on P&O as it happens. A review of that experience can be found here. Whilst the 2 cruises dovetailed together quite well, a couple of ports were repeated, one of which was Madeira. But on my first visit the weather had been terrible and the panoramic excursion I'd booked turned out to be a bit of a bust. But on this occasion the weather was fantastic. You dock against the harbour wall, which is again about a kilometre from the edge of the central area of Funchal. MSC doesn't offer a transfer bus, which isn't something you should expect from a cruise line whose model is built upon offering the lowest possible price point, but I was quite surprised that no one entrepreneurial on Madeira was offering one. There were a few taxis, but most people had no choice but to walk. But it was worth the walk as Funchal was lovely. The first attraction you come to is the Cristiano Ronaldo Museum, as he is a local boy, a popular spot amongst crew members as it offered abundant free Wi-Fi. I didn't linger though and spent a happy few hours wandering around. The Mercado dos Lavradores was a particular highlight. Apologies for my butchering of the Portuguese language. I'll be butchering some Spanish a little bit later in the video. Best known for its produce, the market also has a fish market at the back and some touristy trinket shops upstairs. There's a cathedral in the city of course, and my visit came at the end of the flower festival, so there were some lingering festivities and entertainment from that. That drain piperphone was fun. It took a surprising amount of tuning before it was ready for the performance. Some downtown wildlife spotting was possible too. My next door neighbour has been extolling Madeira for years, and after my first disappointing visit it was finally great to see the place in its full pomp. It's another popular cruise stop and another I'd be happy to revisit as and when the opportunity arises. Our next stop was Las Palmas de Gran Canaria. Hey, my Spanish is probably better than my Portuguese. Las Palmas is the joint capital of the Canaries and is the largest city in the Canary Islands, and Wikipedia tells me it's the 9th largest city in all of Spain, which surprised me. The city has a massive dock complex, although the cruise terminal is close-ish to the town, but even so, it's still a reasonable walk. There's a large mall directly across from the cruise port, although diving into a mall is probably the last thing you want to do on a cruise. I suppose it is an option if the weather is completely terrible. There's also some pedestrianised streets with bars, cafes and a local market, but I found it quite soulless and oddly unappealing on the eye. The weather was also misbehaving after we'd done well in Madeira. The town is quite narrow and it's a short walk through to some beaches, which would be really quite nice on a sunny day. Some quite substantial beaches actually, and so taking towels off the ship could make for a pleasant afternoon if the weather was better for you. Having such a large beach so close to the cruise ship is a major plus point for Gran Canaria as a cruise port. But if I was returning, I'd probably look into taking an excursion further afield, as Las Palmas itself was a little underwhelming. Our next stop was the Canary Islands' other joint capital, Santa Cruz de Tenerife. This was another port which overlapped with my previous Canary Islands cruise, so I talked about the city in a little bit more detail in this video. We docked on the other side of the cruise harbour this time, which did extend the distance you needed to walk to get into town quite considerably. It was the 4th port in a row where the attractions immediately adjacent to the ship are quite limited for those with mobility issues. Taxis were again available though. Having only recently visited, I decided to have a bit of an adventure and took the tram from Santa Cruz up to San Cristobal de la Laguna. This was the capital of the Canaries for many years and is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The tram ride was actually great fun. It's a couple of euros each way with tickets purchasable from machines on the platforms. It was a Sunday and it took about 30 minutes to get up to the old capital. It's quite a scenic climb. The city itself was attractive, largely pedestrianised and not as charismatic as the old towns in, say, Seville or Barcelona, but it was very enjoyable for a few hours. There was a bike race on when I arrived, which, as the city is on a grid, must have been really frustrating for the participants, as you could only pedal in a straight line for a few seconds before having to do a 90-degree turn, but it was fun to watch. And of course, there was a Catholic cathedral. Once again, the weather wasn't at all inspiring that day, but I enjoyed the trip and would recommend it as an interesting diversion. It's very easy to get there independently. I only spotted a handful of other tourists up there, so it was nice to have a somewhat authentic Spanish experience away from the ship. Our next stop was the last in the Canaries, Arrecife de Lanzarote. Again, no bus was available, although there were a handful of taxis. It was about 1.5 kilometres into town this time, although it was quite a scenic walk through the harbour, windy but scenic. The town itself was nice enough, with a pleasant waterside location and some pedestrianised shopping streets. Some interesting public art too. Those apparently are inflated fish bladders, in case you were wondering. My earlier P&O cruise had also taken me to the islands of Fuerteventura and La Palma, so between the two cruises we visited the 5 largest Canary Islands. As I said in that earlier video, you don't go to the islands to visit vibrant cities stacked with grand museums, galleries and cultural attractions. Instead, you visit smaller towns which offer a limited range of attractions but which usually offer easy access to a pleasant beach. It would have been perhaps 4 straight sea days to get back to Southampton, so we broke the journey with a stop in Vigo. Vigo and La Coruña surround Santiago de Compostela, which is the headline destination in the region, and I'd penciled in an independent trip on a train there for this visit. But as it turned out, we were only in port for around 5.5 hours, so whilst a ship excursion could get you there and back in the time allowed, it wasn't possible to make the trip independently on public transport. Next time. A positive though was that finally the ship docked right in the heart of the town. It's quite a hilly place, so a top tip is to take the escalators and lifts in the shopping centre adjacent to the port to gain the elevation you need. There's then a walkway across to the old town at the top. A co-cathedral here, as the bishop is shared with Tui, the Galician town 20 kilometres away rather than the travel company. I feel obligated to take footage inside these places, so I hope you enjoy watching these sequences. The old town of Vigo is quite nice, with the usual narrow streets, open plazas and ferret shops. They must be a popular pet in Spain. We finally got some sun, although it was still cold and quite windy. For a summer that saw record temperatures set across Europe, we did a brilliant job of avoiding all of the hot weather on both of our cruises. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and that's your cue to click away immediately before I can invite you to click the like button and to consider subscribing if you like this sort of content. Please also leave me a comment if you fancy visiting any of these places. And if you'd like to support what I do more directly, there is a Patreon account, the link to which is in the description below. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.